Vezina Trophy winning goalie Connor Hellebuyck is leaving the Winnipeg Jets. I'll get into the significance of this in just a minute, but first, welcome to Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. I'm Amanda. Hockey analysis, book obsession. You miss 100% of the pages you don't read. This is the third episode, so if you're here, thank you for being early. Hopefully you already listened to the first two episodes, but if you missed them, go back and listen to episode 1, where I go analyze why the Carolina Hurricanes won and skate my way through the first ACOTAR book. Then, in episode 2, I break down the President's Trophy curse and glide through the second ACOTAR book. Here at Plot Twists and Hat Tricks, the episodes are broken down into 3 segments or periods. The first period is always hockey analysis. It could be about the NHL, and it could be about the PWHL. You will just have to tune in to find out. The second period is where I talk about a book. There are never any spoilers for the book being talked about, ever. Then finally, we have the third period, which, similar to the game of hockey, anything can happen, so I consider it my wild card, and it changes every week. Well, let's lace up those skates and take the ice. The first period is about to start. This episode's first period is on the free agency frenzy. So let's talk about what free agency frenzy is. Before I get started, this is going to be a chaos episode, which is quite fitting for what the theme of this episode is going to be. Due to me being new to podcasting and wanting to use this as a hook to get new listeners, I am literally recording this the night before it drops. So I am sitting at my computer recording at about 6:45 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on July 1st. And this podcast drops on July 2nd. So with that being said, it's most likely going to be a one-shot with very little edits, which kind of fits the theme of the free agency frenzy. So what is the free agency frenzy? I've said that term a couple times already. It is essentially a term used in sports to indicate a day when contracts are up, and if the team a player is not currently signed with wants him or her, then they can reach out to their agent directly. With a free agent, they do not necessarily have to go through the team anymore. So this isn't like our typical trades that we're seeing. So if your team has a free agent, they can just essentially poof and disappear, and the team gets nothing for them, which is why this is called a frenzy. You kind of think of like a shark attack kind of deal. In years past, we've seen huge blockbuster moves, such as Patrick Kane leaving the Chicago Blackhawks to go to the New York Rangers, or John Tavares moving from the New York Islanders and going to his hometown team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Needless to say, this date, July 1st, is circled on most hockey fans' calendars. There are 4 groups of free agents that a player can fall into. Per the NHL, there are 4 groups. So the first group is a Group 2 restricted free agent. These are players that have received a qualifying offer by their respective clubs and are subject to draft choice compensation and the right to match. The draft choice compensation scale is based on a compensation scale. I'm not going to go through like all the numbers for it, but essentially what a restricted free agent means is that the team that the player is currently on has gone ahead and extended an offer. For whatever reason, the player did not accept that offer and wants to test the free agency market. So if we're using one of the big named players right now, that is in Group 2, which is Jason Robertson of the Dallas Stars. So let's say, for example, Dallas offered him $2.5 million average annual value. Super low for him, but we're just playing with numbers right now. And he rejected that offer. Let's say the Colorado Avalanche approach Robertson and his team, and they go ahead and offer him $3 million. Let's say that Robertson likes that offer. Then essentially Dallas gets the opportunity to match that offer or let him go to the Avs. Essentially, the difference between the restricted and the unrestricted free agents that we see are these are players typically coming off entry-level contracts and will be signing their first big contract after they've completed their first 3 seasons in the NHL. So typically, all of the players will hit this Group 2 restricted free agent at some point. We just don't always see the players being listed as a Group 2 restricted free agent during the free agency frenzy due to teams wanting to sign these big name players. So for the Group 3 unrestricted free agents, they are typically aged 27 or older or with at least 7 accrued seasons. And so these are where a majority of the players are falling. And so this is kind of like that catch-all. You're looking for maybe your third contract being signed, and you've played at least 7 seasons in the NHL. The next group is unrestricted free agents Group 6, which these players qualify for unrestricted free agency. This group is defined as players whose contracts have expired, are aged 25 or older, have completed 3 or more professional seasons, and, in the case of a player other than a goaltender, have played fewer than 80 regular season games. Or, in the case of a goaltender, have played fewer than 28 NHL games. So this is kind of a unique experience. We are seeing these in some of the players that are coming up and down from the minors and are not playing full seasons yet at an NHL level. So they have their own special group. And then we just have the unrestricted free agents, which means these guys that don't belong to a group, and they can just sign with another team. Anybody can approach them and talk to them. They don't need necessarily permission from their team to do anything, and they can just sign away and poof. So there have been some big moves prior to free agency frenzy that we've seen. There's 2 big headlines that I want to cover. The first one is Brady Tkachuk moving from the Ottawa Senators to play with his brother on the Florida Panthers. This is huge, and probably not necessarily in the way that a lot of people are thinking of it. Brady fits the type of play and the style of play that the Florida Panthers put on the ice every night. So from that aspect, he's going to fit right in. He also brings just a different level in his offensive skill. Seeing him and Matthew play together in the Four Nations and then again during the Olympics on the same line, Paul Maurice is in for a treat with those guys. They remind me a lot of the Bash brothers from the Mighty Ducks. So they are definitely going to be some enforcers, and Florida Panthers are quickly going to become probably one of the most hated teams in the league, without a doubt. I am a little concerned about Ottawa, to be completely honest, because Brady was the star player for Ottawa. I do believe they're having some up-and-comings, but they're definitely going to be in a rebuild after this. There are rumors that another veteran forward for the Senators in Claude Giroux might be going back to the Philadelphia Flyers, and if that does end up happening, they're going to have a very young team with not a lot of leadership, so they will definitely be a team I'm keeping my eye on during this regular season and for the next several seasons. The next big headline that I want to address is Bowen Byram going from the Sabres to the Blackhawks. So this is big because I liked Byram on the Sabres. For those of you who don't know, Bowen Byram used to play for the Colorado Avalanche. If I'm recalling correctly, he was second or third line. He was never going to be a top defenseman with the Avalanche, especially when you're competing with Cale Makar and Devon Taves. He just wasn't going to get that first line ability. And he wasn't going to get that at Buffalo either, but I think he was a great fit for Buffalo and the style of play. He was really able to grow into his own player. I think the Blackhawks are trying to rebuild, and they have been in a rebuild since Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane left several years ago. So they've been kind of in that rebuild since. And yes, they have Connor Bedard, and they have been making some big signings. I think Bowen Byram might get that first line ability now with Chicago, but I don't know if he is a player that, if he's in that conversation for a top defenseman in the league to be on that first line. I'll be very interested to see how he performs this season, and I will be more than happy to take back anything that I say right now and doubting Byram's performance and eat my words in the future. But he definitely has, with that paycheck that he is getting from the Blackhawks, he'll have a lot to prove, and it will be very interesting to see him in that role where he might end up being one of the top defensemen on a team. So there were also some expected moves that did not happen at the time of recording. My little hook was about Connor Hellebuyck leaving the Winnipeg Jets. And as of the time of this recording, at least, let me just double check my phone. It does not look like I did, because my phone would be blowing up if Connor Hellebuyck moved. But he is being rumored to leave the Winnipeg Jets, especially since they acquired Stuart Skinner from the Pittsburgh Penguins. I have a lot of feelings about Connor Hellebuyck leaving Winnipeg. I personally, as an Avs fan, I am fine with him leaving Winnipeg as long as he does not go to another Central Division team, because then I don't have to worry about him. He has been rumored in talking to Carolina, which is interesting because obviously Carolina is just coming off of winning a cup, and they have Frederik Andersen, but he is also up for free agency and might be injured and might end up hanging it up. So if Carolina doesn't sign Andersen, I think that leaves room for Hellebuyck to come in. I have seen some trade rumors around the league of Connor Hellebuyck wanting to go to Florida, where I think he would do great in Florida, especially reconnecting with some Team USA teammates. I don't think that there's currently a place for him, especially with the fact that another big name recently left that I'll be talking about here shortly, and that they signed Jacob Markstrom from the New Jersey Devils as their new goalie. I don't think there's room for Connor Hellebuyck right now. I could see him going to Carolina if they don't re-sign Andersen. I could see him going to Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh does have some goaltending issues that they could resolve, and that he could definitely step up into that role. It'll be interesting to see where he lands. If he lands in the next couple of days prior to the next recording, then I might do an emergency episode to talk about that. But we're just going to let that sit and see where he goes. The next one that I want to talk about is Dylan Larkin. He requested a trade from the Detroit Red Wings, and he gave a short list of three teams that he wants to join. If you have been following me on social, I have been talking about Dylan Larkin. I'm still working on social media where this is a learning process. So I'm hoping to create little short videos that I can release between episodes that is covering especially during this free agency time and then again when trade deadline hits in March. But talking about Larkin, focused on him, he requested a trade to either Minnesota, Florida, or the Vegas Golden Knights. So I have been thinking about which team Larkin would fit in best with. Personally, I think he would look really good with Minnesota. I think he makes sense for Minnesota. I think he brings some depth to the Minnesota that they didn't have against the Avalanche. He doesn't have as much playoff experience, but I think spending an entire season with the Wild would be good for him. I think that he would develop and he would have that championship mindset that he might be missing from the Red Wings. I think that the Wild are definitely going to be a scary team for the next several seasons, and they're going to continue to give the Avs and Dallas a run for their money. I expect to see them in the playoffs for the at least next 5 years. So I would like to see Larkin on Minnesota. I think he'd be a good fit there. I don't think that he is a good fit for Vegas. I think that a reason why Vegas is on the list is because of a lifestyle kind of deal. And I think there are some strong players on Vegas. I just don't see exactly where Larkin would fall on Vegas right now. And then the final team with Florida, I can see why he wants to go to Florida. He, again, very similar to Vegas in kind of payment-wise and lifestyle-wise, but I also think he wants to connect with his USA teammates. So if we're looking at those three teams that he talked about, just off the top of my head without looking at rosters, you have Quinn Hughes on Minnesota, you have the Tkachuk brothers on Florida, and you have Jack Eichel on Vegas that he would be connecting with. So he very easily could have made great relationships with those players during either Four Nations or during the Olympics, and I could see him going to any of those teams, but I definitely think it's Minnesota. And then the last player that I kind of expected to be moved but hasn't been at the time of this recording is Jason Robertson. I've seen some rumors popping around. I was actually kind of shocked this morning when I was going through the list of restricted and unrestricted free agents, and to see Jason Robertson on that list, I was like, Dallas, why didn't you sign him already? He is a core player for them without a doubt. He definitely delivers. He's very consistent, and it was shocking to see him on there. I have not heard too many rumors about him, but I do know that his brother, I believe Nick Robertson, was traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that could be a potential landing spot if he wants to play with his brother. That seems to be a common theme recently with brothers wanting to play on the same team. And so I could see Jason potentially going to Pittsburgh. I do know that he vetoed a trade to Seattle, which would have been absolutely huge and would have given Seattle some depth that they are missing. I'd be shocked if Jason Robertson ends up leaving the Dallas Stars, to be completely honest. He would be another player that I would do an emergency episode for if he ends up moving from the Stars. So there are two players that I want to talk about that were moved prior to the recording that we need to talk about. So the first one being Sergei Bobrovsky going to the Toronto Maple Leafs. As you may or may not know, Sergei Bobrovsky has been playing with the Florida Panthers. He won 2 Stanley Cups with them. He has won at least 1 Vezina trophy with them. And he's kind of fallen off this season. And the Panthers did not make the playoffs this year, so we did not get to see any playoff performance from Bobrovsky, which I personally think is some of his best play. Him going to Toronto, that's big because Toronto has also been struggling in the goaltending department for several seasons now. And you can tell that team is trying to rebuild with changing. We saw this starting last year with the Mitch Marner trade, with Mitch Marner going to Vegas. The core 4 being shook up. I still have thoughts and feelings about that, but do I think that that was a good trade for Marner? Yes. I think he was able to grow on Vegas in a way that he wasn't able to grow on Toronto. And I think that he was able to become the player that he wanted to be on Vegas. And that Toronto, to an extent, was limiting him. Not by design or anyone's fault. There's just so much talent in that locker room that Marner kind of was being overshadowed. So to see Bobrovsky go to Toronto is a big deal because you're going to have a veteran goalie, and the goaltending is not going to be a concern, in my opinion. I believe in Bobrovsky. I would love to have him as my goalie. I think he's solid. When he is off his game, he's definitely off his game, but that is the case with many goalies. So I think that Toronto is definitely trying to make a statement that they are going to be a powerhouse for this upcoming season. But it only matters when they hit the playoffs. Like, they could do great in the regular season, but if they are first round exits again, there's still some problems in Toronto that we'll need to talk about, but I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that story. And then the next big story was Zach Werenski is staying with Columbus. There was some rumors that he was looking to leave Columbus and that he was vetoing trades. He was looking at Dallas. He vetoed a trade from Dallas, from I believe Carolina, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But it broke earlier on social media a statement from both the GM, Don Waddle, and a statement from Zach Werenski himself. So I'm going to take a minute to read both of these statements that the Blue Jackets posted on their social media page. So from GM Don Waddle. Earlier this spring, Zach and I met and talked about his future with the Blue Jackets beyond his current contract, and he indicated that he wasn't sure what the future would hold with regards to staying with the club or possibly moving on. During those discussions, we talked about me exploring opportunities to move him now, and we all agreed if there was a deal to be made that I would bring it to him. We found something that would work for the club and took it to him. After some time and discussion with his family, Zach informed us that he didn't want to leave Columbus. He has invested a great deal in this organization, and after coming close and falling short the past 2 seasons, his desire to win here and get his team back into the playoffs. The past 2 seasons have been very challenging ones, but also ones of growth for our team. Our goals from ownership on down and Zach's goals are the same. To win now, return to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and win a Stanley Cup. Our city and fans deserve nothing less, and we are all on the same page working towards that end. Zach has been part of this organization and our community for a long time, and we couldn't be happier that he will continue to be moving forward. Statement from Zach Wawrinski. Dawn and I have had very open and honest dialogue since the season ended. Ideally, this wouldn't have become such a public thing, but that is the world we live in now, and everything got blown out of proportion, in my opinion. I want to win, and I want to do that in Columbus. As I've thought about things and discussed everything with my wife and family, we want to be in Columbus. It has been my home for the past 10 years, and I've always been proud to be a Blue Jacket. We have the best fans in the NHL. I love my teammates and coaches, and I'm looking forward to doing everything I can to get us back into the playoffs, to compete for a Stanley Cup. Dawn and I are completely aligned on that and are excited about what's to come with our team. I think that those statements did need to come out from both the GM and from Wawrinski because of the speculation. I mean, he just came off winning the James Norris Trophy this past season, and he's a crucial part of their defense. So to see him potentially being traded would have been absolutely huge for the league and would have put Columbus in probably a very precarious situation with losing such a strong defenseman. That was a crazy first period. Lots going on this offseason. I'm excited to see where some big names that had not moved at the time of this recording end up and how else the league shakes up during this offseason. But while we catch our breaths, let's stop by Prythian and see how the intense ending of ACOWAR is affecting our characters. This episode's second period is on the third book of the ACOTAR series, A Court of Wings and Ruin. The plot of this book is immediately after the events of ACOWAR, or A Court of Mist and Fury. Farah uses her newfound powers to help her family, both natural and found, beat the odds against a new threat in the King of Hybern. How I have consumed this book. I typically eyeball read it, and then I do audio on rereads. I am actually currently rereading ACOWAR, and am almost done, but needless to say, I've read it several times, so no need to worry about content on that. So why should you read it? Well, it's the end of the original trilogy, meaning that it's the end of what we are receiving from Farah's point of view. So it's kind of wrapping up her story in a way, meaning that we are shifting to different points of view. I think that it's just growth, especially in Farah's healing journey that she's been on since the events of really ACOTAR, the first book in the series. So I think it just wraps everything together. So what are my thoughts of this book? To be honest, it is not my favorite in the series. I will stand by that my favorite book in the series is Court of Mist and Fury, which is the second book, and then the final released book as of right now, which is A Court of Silver Flames, which I'll be covering in a couple weeks. Those are my two favorite books, but this one I do like it. I think it is a good wrap to all the storylines. This one is a little bit more action-packed than we're seeing in like A Court of Mist and Fury, where there's a lot more romance. Romance takes a back seat in this book. It is a lot of action. There's a lot of politics. There is a lot of battle scenes. And of all the books, this one reminds me the most of playoffs when we're seeing it in a book form, so to speak, when none of the characters are hockey players, and hockey I don't think exists in Prythian, but It's the battles that the characters go through, and it's the page turning of wanting to know what happens next. You get a little bit of everything, of betrayals to surprise kidnappings to surprise character appearances to just a lot of character development. We see some new characters emerging. We see our female main character in Farah just developing so much. Like, to see where she started in ACOTAR as being part of a poverty-stricken family where she was the breadwinner, she was the youngest in the family, and then she's kidnapped by a fae, and then she goes to this fae world, and her life's completely turned upside down, and she has all this time, all this money, and she doesn't know what to do with it, and she falls in love during that time, and then she also falls out of love and falls back in love, which is a lot of what A Court of Mist and Fury is. And like I said in episode 2, there's a lot of connection with A Court of Mist and Fury on a personal level for me, and I know throughout the fandom. So seeing Farah's healing journey complete, see her come into a character as her own, is, in my opinion, a great reason to read ACOWAR. I know that in future books, like I'm covering A Court of Frost and Starlight next episode, and then, like I said, A Court of Silver Flames the following week. You do miss Farah, especially in A Court of Silver Flames, because you're so used to hearing her point of view and seeing the world through her point of view, and it's a little shocking. I will be honest. I remember the first time I read through it, when Farah wasn't the main character anymore and she just became a side character. It was a little shocking, and I was like, man, I miss like hearing her thoughts and her inner monologue, because I really connected with her. And I mean, that's the point, is you need to connect with the main character. So like I said, ACOWAR is not my favorite in the series, but it definitely has the most action. It has probably the least amount of romance, or in the series rather. It has really good pacing, and it keeps you on your toes. And if you're looking for a book that is similar to Game of Hockey, I would say ACOWAR is pretty high up there. I will warn you that not knowing the events of ACOTAR and ACOMATH might leave you a little confused. So I do plan on doing an everything you need to know about ACOTAR before the 6th book comes out this October. And that would be a good episode to listen to, at least for the first 2 parts, to learn about the events of ACOTAR and ACOMATH. But if you don't want to wait that long, you'll probably finish the books before I get to that episode. That's the second period today. Nice, short and sweet. And we were able to collect ourselves during that second period. Everything seems to be wrapped up in a nice little bow. So let's take a load off and have some fun in the third period. I grabbed some random players from the NHL and the PWHL, and I put them into the courts of Prythian. There are no spoilers. You can look up a map of Prythian if you would like. Prythian is the fantasy world that ACOTAR is set in, and that's the Fae world. And I make a discussion for why I think these players might fit there. So there will be no spoilers. Basically, how I used the criteria was I looked at the player, I looked at the personality, I looked how their playing style, I looked at where they're playing, and took in just a bunch of little factors like that to be like, hey, you work great in this role for this court. I had a lot of fun doing it, and For those of you who have read ACOTAR and have feelings about a certain character, I am putting a very big named player in a very controversial position. And I have my reasons for why. It is not based off of the character, so please don't come at me in the comments for it. So essentially, I used Claude to randomly choose 10 NHL players because I could have just chose 10 random teams and just chose a player off that team, but that didn't sound like fun, so I used Claude. It's the year of AI, so Claude gave me these players. Again, there's 10 NHL players and 5 PWHL, which I've used PWHL as an acronym a lot and just realized that I have not actually defined what that acronym is. And if you don't know hockey, you're like, what is that? The PWHL is the Professional Women's Hockey League. It is a growing league. And if you want to learn more about the PWHL, tune in a couple weeks where I'm doing an entire episode dedicated to them. Anyway, back to the third period. So I put each of these players in a court, and then I gave them a role. Either High Lord or High Lady, an emissary, or a spy master. And then I think I threw a general in there. So let's talk about that a little bit. So first player is, I was really glad that Claude chose this player, to be honest, is Nathan MacKinnon. He plays for the Colorado Avalanche. He also happens to be my favorite player. So I agonized over where to put him. And once I took out the pressure of, hey, you're not actually trying to make him a character in the ACOTAR universe, you're just trying to put him in a role and a court based off of where you think he will fit. So I put him as a spy master in the winter court. And reasoning why is Mac likes to kind of keep to himself. You see this a lot in interviews. He's done a lot better recently in media training, but generally speaking, he just wants to go play hockey and he wants to just do his thing. And he doesn't want the interviews. He doesn't necessarily want the fame. He just wants to play hockey. And so I think he would be a great spy master because he can just kind of go do his own thing. And I chose the winter court because he is from Halifax, Nova Scotia, which gets a lot of snow. And he's also playing for the Avalanche. So winter court just felt right for him. And also just kind of the location of the winter court, it seemed like that would be a good place for him to go. The next player is Austin Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I made him the emissary for the spring court. So reason why is, so Austin Matthews is originally from Arizona. So I was like, he would probably like spring. I was between putting him in spring and summer court, kind of depending. I landed on spring because with the spring court being so close to the human realm, it felt like he would be able to go into the human realm and be fine, but he could also handle Fae politics. And with him being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, he has to be good with people. And you see him in interviews, he handles interviews really well, especially with the pressure that Toronto has in general, with it being such a big hockey city. I think he would do really well as an emissary, especially in the spring court. Next player is Connor McDavid, or McJesus as he is known around the league. He plays for the Edmonton Oilers. I made him the High Lord of the spring court. Now, there's a character that is the High Lord of the spring court that we meet in the ACOTAR universe, and he is not a very well-liked character. And I was tentative to assign Connor to the spring court because of this controversy. I do not believe that Connor McDavid is anything like this character. I purely put him as the High Lord of the spring court because of how close he is to humans. And how he is kind of like that border between the rest of the Fae courts and the human realm. And I think that he would actually take care of them and realize the position that he's in and want to help and want to support that team. I made him a High Lord, support both the humans and the Fae. I put him as High Lord because he is a captain. He is a top player in the league. I think he has great communication skills. Where I did not put too much thought into putting players in similar courts, it does actually work nicely that Austin Matthews is an emissary for the Spring Court, because I think those two would be able to work together, and because they are both captains and they would have good communication skills and be able to help with the relationship between the Fae and humans. And so that's why I think Connor McDavid would do well as High Lord of the Spring Court. Not because he has any relation to a character that will not be named right now. The next randomly generated player was Seth Jarvis of the Carolina Hurricanes. I made him as emissary of the Autumn Court. So the reason for the Autumn Court, there really isn't one, to be completely honest with you. I just thought that he would like to vibe in that area. He seems like a super chill dude. He is kind of known as a prankster, so I thought that he would have great relationships with other emissaries and other courts, which is why I made him an emissary. And with Autumn Court's location kind of like in the middle of all the courts, I thought that that would be a good place for him. Jason Robertson, who is currently with the Dallas Stars, TBD if that will be at the start of the season, I put him as emissary for the Day Court. So I put him as an emissary mainly because he has that communication factor. You see him working really well in teams. He's very flexible where he is. Being an Avs fan, have watched him a lot, obviously, with him playing with Dallas. And to see him grow as a player, I think he would be good at communicating with others and kind of bringing people together. And I chose the Day Court because I was kind of between day and summer, because Dallas and day just seemed to fit a little bit better. The next one I have is Rasmus Dahlin. My apologies for any pronunciation issues. We're still working on that. He plays for the Buffalo Sabres, and I put him as High Lord of the Dawn Court. So, reason why I put him as a High Lord is he is a captain and he plays defense. So it is very unique to see a defenseman as a captain of a team. It is not completely uncommon, but we just don't see it very often. And I chose Dawn Court because he strikes me as the person who wants to get up and get things done. And Dawn Court is all about morning stuff. So I think that he would be a good fit there. So the next one I have is Jack Eichel of the Vegas Golden Knights. So I put him as a spy master for the Day Court. And a reason why I did Day Court, because Vegas, again, between Day and Summer Court, because of the location of his team. I did spy master because he's a little sneaky guy. He was drafted pretty high by the Buffalo Sabres, and he made waves when he requested a trade out of Buffalo to go to Vegas, and then won a cup with them the following season of the trade. So I think he would be good at strategy, and I think you need that as a spy master. On the opposite end, we have Quinn Hughes of the Minnesota Wild. I also put him as a spy master, but I put him for Day or Dawn Court for the opposite reason of Jack Hughes. Quinn is very, very calculated. He's a defenseman, and playing against him in the second round of Stanley Cup, he was scary. He was on the ice most of the game, and I was anxious about him. I think he would be a great spy master because I think he just has good strategy, and I think he just sees the game in a different way. And I think that would just make him I think he would do fine in Day or Dawn. I could see him a little bit more in Dawn because he strikes me as the person who wants to get the most out of his day, so he wants to start early. Our next player is Jake Gensel of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I made him emissary of the Dawn Court. And so my reasoning with this is Jake Gensel. Love that dude. He was originally drafted with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the 6th round, and to be honest, being drafted that late, it is not very common that you become a top line player. But he did. He defied the odds. He was playing on the top line with Sidney Crosby. He was playing power play. He was Sidney Crosby's winger. He was doing the things. And he went to Carolina, did some stuff in Carolina. I thought he was a great fit in Carolina. I liked seeing him in Carolina. And then he ended up in Tampa. So, not to say that moving a lot of teams necessarily makes you a great emissary, but I think it's because of the adversity that Jake Gensel has achieved so far in his career would make him a great emissary, because he would be able to relate to more people and be able to relate to what other courts need. And I put him in Dawn because, again, I think he's one of those that seizes the day. Now, our last NHL player is Brady Tkachuk. When I originally drafted this, he was for the Ottawa Senators. In case you missed the first part of this episode, he has since been traded to the Florida Panthers. He is also the only general that I have on my list, and that is because he doesn't strike me as somebody who would be content being a High Lord. He doesn't strike me as someone who would be a spy master and kind of hide in the shadows, or an emissary, like communicating between the courts. I think he would want to be the one leading the battles. Some of that is because of his playing style. He can be a little aggressive, but I think he would be, of all the players that we had on this list, I think he would be a great general. And I chose Autumn Court mainly because it was originally Ottawa Senators and that he was playing with. So it made sense a little bit more for Ottawa than it does for Florida. I also think that kind of being in the location that the Autumn Court is, I think he would just fit there because he is kind of in the middle of everything, and he would make the call if other courts needed help, of if the Autumn Court would go and help them. So I think he would be a good fit there. Now on to our 5 PWHL, or Professional Women's Hockey League, players. So of course, no list would be complete if we did not have Hillary Knight. So at the time of me writing this draft, she was on Boston Fleet. I believe she has now gone to the expansion team in Detroit, which I do not believe has a name other than PWHL Detroit. My apologies if there is, and I will correct that in a future episode. I put her as High Lady of the Night Court, and that is purely because Hillary Knight is, in my opinion, a badass. I've been watching her play for as long as I can remember, and I feel like being in the Night Court, you're at like the tippy top of Prythian, and you are also in charge of 2 different courts. You have the Court of Dreams, and then you have the Court of Nightmares, and you might have to be a couple different people for that. And I think of all the players that I've seen, she would be the one that is set for the job. I think she could be the person that she needs to be and still represent herself with, she could still represent herself with grace. The next player is Taylor Heese. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. She currently plays for the Minnesota Frost, and I put her as an emissary for the Night Court. And I did that purely because of her time with Team USA. She floated up in the USA women's hockey team development team, as well as going and playing college and then going back and playing with USA during like World Cups, and just kind of balancing all of that. And I think she'd be a great emissary because of that. I think she's very cultured, and I think she would be great for that. And I chose Night Court because, to be honest, I put Hillary Knight as High Lady way before I did this. I kind of knew where I wanted to put her. I put Taylor in Night Court because of her experience with traveling so much to different countries and being part of the Olympics and being part of Team USA. And I think that gives her an advantage, and especially with the Night Court being so high and on the tippy top of Perithian, I feel like she would need those skills to be able to go down to the other courts and still be able to relate to them. The next PWH player I have is Marie-Philippe Poulin. She currently plays for Montreal Victoria. She was also the captain, if I'm remembering correctly, of Team Canada. I chose her for the winter court because Team Canada and her professional team is in Montreal. So all of that checks out. And honestly, when I think of Team Canada, I'm thinking she's one of the first players I think of. So her being High Lady and a representation for the winter court is a good fit. The next player I have is a name I'm probably going to butcher, and I am so sorry. Elena Mueller, who currently plays for Boston Fleet, and I put her as emissary for the winter court. She is not part of Team USA or Team Canada. I believe she's from Team Sweden, but again, this is Chaos episode, so that was something I should have researched, but I didn't. And alas, here we are. And so I put her as emissary purely for that because of different cultures. And I think being center in the winter court will put her at an advantage for that. And then our final player is Megan Keller of Boston Fleet. And I put her as High Lady of Autumn Court. Megan Keller scored the game-winning goal against Team Canada to win the gold medal for Team USA this past Olympics. And I could not think of a better person for High Lady of the Autumn Court. And I chose the Autumn Court, again, kind of for the location. She strikes me as somebody who would like the Autumn area, especially working with Boston. And when I was thinking High Lady, she just felt right for the Autumn Court. And again, my apologies if any of the PWHL teams have since changed. It's trying to keep track of where those players are going right now is a little bit of a challenge, and I'm working on a better system to keep track of them like I keep track of the NHL players. All right, that is it, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning into the third episode of Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. Since we are a brand new rookie podcast, please rate 5 stars and leave a nice review, as it helps other hockey lovers and book enthusiasts find me. I am active on social media. Find me on TikTok and Instagram at PTHTpod, or email me at pthtpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas for future episodes. Until then, remember, you miss 100% of the pages you never read and the shots you never take. If you haven't already, go ahead and listen to the first 2 episodes of this podcast, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Bye, guys.